Broadcasting from Charlotte, North Carolina, on Sports Byline USA, uniting sports fans everywhere. This is Unpacking It with Bryce Johnson.
I'm not sure that God really cares about my comfort or my happiness so much as he does my holiness and my surrender to him.
For the next hour, we will unpack sports, faith, and life with intriguing guests from the sports and entertainment world.
I think if we're going to get to our full potential in anything, it's going to require community around us.
Bringing you high energy and thought-provoking sports talk with a purpose.
You're going to be defined as a man, as a husband, as a father when you take the uniform off. Who is that guy?
Now, from his mic to your ears, this is Bryce Johnson.
Welcome to Unpacking It, where we unpack sports, faith, and life with intriguing guests from the sports and entertainment world. I'm Bryce Johnson, fired up to be with you today because we have got an awesome story to share with you. Our guest today is Hutch Eckerson. He's a former NFL offensive lineman, and he has had quite the journey. And we will go through really the highs and lows of his career and his life. And this includes being an offensive lineman at South Carolina. It includes getting to the NFL, but his career being cut short, what it means to have your dream end and be in this place of wondering, what do you do next? And for him, he at first turned to drugs and got addicted to painkillers. And then ultimately, he realized his need for God, and God met him in that place and radically changed his life. And so it's a unique story, yet there are a lot of similarities that many of us can identify with, relate to, and I think you'll be encouraged and inspired by his story today. So he's coming up in just a little bit, and then later on toward the end of the show, we'll do our segment Unpack This about the NBA Finals. And my big question, why do bad things happen to great teams? And why do bad things happen to good people? So we'll take a look at that in just a little bit as well. Check out our website, unpackingit.com. Be sure to subscribe to our email devotional and our podcast. We're just getting started. So glad to be with you. I'm Bryce Johnson. This is Unpacking It on Sports Byline USA and SiriusXM Channel 211.
Inspiring conversations and intriguing interviews. More Unpacking It with Bryce Johnson after this. Bringing you unique insight into the faith and character of guests from the sports world. Welcome back to Unpacking It with Bryce Johnson.
And joining us now is Hutch Eckerson, a former NFL offensive lineman who spent time with the Chargers, Bills, Chiefs, and Saints. He was highly recruited out of high school and played his college football at South Carolina from 2006 to 2010. He is now a business owner and founder of Made New Ministries. He is also highly involved with the NFL Players Association. Hutch joins us today to share his story about how his career ended early, drug addiction, and being made new because of Jesus. Hutch, thanks so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Wow. What an introduction that was, man.
Well, we're psyched to have you, man. Really appreciate you being a part of the show today. And, of course, this time of year in the NFL, it's all about OTAs, mini camps, and then in a month, everybody will be gearing up for training camp. And so take us back to your time as you were fighting to make it at OTAs. You were fighting to make an NFL roster, trying to prove yourself. What was that truly like for you?
Well, Bryce, interesting enough, I came out the year of the lockout with the new players agreement and just all that stuff going on. So here I was sitting in South Carolina wondering if I was going to get a shot at, my dream of playing in the NFL. And it was past all the OTA times, all the acclimation period that rookies typically get in that season. It was just not happening at that time. So I actually showed up to San Diego for training camp. The second day of training camp. So all of that acclimation period that most people experience when they transition from college to professional was just non-existent. I was showing up with the veterans, competing for a job on the team. So it was a little bit of trial by fire, I guess is a good way to explain it.
Yeah. So what do you feel like you missed because of that? And what was there any advantage to just being thrown in there? What was that like?
Hindsight's 2020. Of course, I missed a lot of just getting used to the speed and the strength and the play calling of the NFL. But I guess an advantage of it was I just didn't know any better. To me, it was getting an opportunity to go and put on an NFL helmet and go and compete.
And so, okay, so your NFL career included a lot of situations where you get signed, you try to prove yourself, you spend some time with a certain team, then you get released. And so take us through this, and let's kind of go through your early years in the NFL for you. And so here you are, you go undrafted. It's during a lockout year. You spend some time with the Chargers, and then take us through kind of the experience that you went through.
Sure. Yeah. It was a lot of negatives, I guess, that were on paper against me. Being an undrafted rookie free agent the year of the lockout. You kind of read that you're on the bottom of the totem pole a little bit, man. But all that stuff really didn't matter to me because I've always felt like there was like a bigger calling, like I was supposed to do something, bigger than myself. Football really was just checking all the boxes up to that point. And so there was like no doubt in my mind that it wasn't going to work out. And if it wasn't with the Chargers, it was going to be with the next team. And of course it was a roller coaster of emotions, getting cut and then getting picked up. And, a lot of kind of days where you're just working out, waiting for the phone to ring. But it always did. It always did ring, and you always did show back up to another camp or try out. And so there was no sign of that, stopping or anything. So I was pretty confident that I would find a home with a team eventually.
Yeah. So I think as fans, especially this time of year with a lot of guys trying out during mini camps and whether it's veteran camps or rookie camps, everybody's trying to, move themselves up the depth chart. And then we'll hear, okay, this guy was released, this guy was signed, and there are a lot of transactions that take place. And a lot of times fans just sort of, overlook it. But the reality is this is a guy's life, his livelihood, his dream, his desire to make a team. He's given all he has to do that. And so that's why I'm fascinated by your story and your perspective as far as, showing up to another team and still believing in yourself enough to keep going even after getting released, even, after fighting to make a spot, not making that team, having to go somewhere else. So what can you say to, the fan listening today to try to understand the personal side of that and the struggle, the challenge that goes into it?
Yeah, well, I can only speak to my personal experience, and that was I thought that a plan B was giving up on plan A, which was making a NFL football team, because it gave me everything that I wanted at that point in life. And so, thinking about something else and thinking that it wasn't going to work was a weak way of thinking in my head. So I just approached it like, this is going to happen. There's no alternative. Like, this has to happen. And yeah, but it really is so personal and such a big deal to the individual players, but it's hard to kind of imagine that if it's not happening to you. You know what I mean? Like, if you're watching it and you're a big fan, you love it, but like when you are the guy with the helmet on you got the gloves on, you're looking down, and your feet are planted on, the Dallas Cowboys football field, and you're about to play the Dallas Cowboys. Like it's all of a sudden it's real. It's you. It's happening to you, and kind of that feeling and not getting overwhelmed and not letting the outside pressure and the noise and the things that you've heard and that scouts have been telling you and you've been telling yourself, man, it's kind of all that rolled up into one moment, but that's happening right now.
Wow.
So if that makes any sense and you can kind of feel that a little bit, that would be the best way that I could describe where I was at in that season of my life.
Yeah, no, that's really cool and just an interesting perspective from Hutch Eckerson, former NFL offensive lineman who spent time with the Chargers, Bills, Chiefs, and Saints and played his college career at South Carolina. And so I want to pause for a moment with your NFL career because we'll get back to that. But I want to kind of set things up from a high school and college perspective because here you were highly recruited out of high school and you're from a small town and you end up choosing South Carolina. So take us into that time in your life where you are getting recruited and here Steve Spurrier wants you to come, play for his team. What was that experience like for you?
Oh, that was just a great time. That was truly a blessing. And like you said, just to have college coaches noticing you and coming to school and coming to your home and, these people that you've only seen on TV and ESPN, in a place that you're familiar with saying, we want you. That's such an amazing feeling for a high school kid, for a young guy that we're all looking for purpose. We're all looking for identity. And when you have someone like Coach Spurrier saying, we want to bring you here to be a part of something new. We want to bring you here because, I like to win, and we want to develop a very strong foundation at South Carolina to win big. That's why I chose South Carolina. It was an opportunity to do something new that has never been done before. I think that we did an okay job at that. Didn't hit all the goals, but we sure hit a lot of them, and that was a big part of my decision.
We're going to take a quick break, and we want to continue this story where Hutch Eckerson is playing at South Carolina. He's an offensive lineman. He's got his sights set on the NFL, and then we're going to talk about when the dream doesn't come true. What happens? Who does Hutch Eckerson become, and who is he today? It's all coming up right here on Unpacking It. He's former NFL offensive lineman Hutch Eckerson. I'm Bryce Johnson. You're listening to Unpacking It.
Intriguing guests and inspiring conversations. This is Unpacking It with Bryce Johnson.
Welcome back to Unpacking It. I'm Bryce Johnson. Hope you're doing great today. Check out our website, unpackingit.com. We're in the middle of a conversation with former NFL offensive lineman Hutch Eckerson. He spent time with the Chargers, Bills, Chiefs, and Saints. He was highly recruited out of high school and played his college football at South Carolina. He's now a business owner and founder of Made New Ministries, which we're going to get to in just a little bit. But Hutch, let's continue with you now. So here you are, you're fighting to make teams, you're getting opportunities, teams are signing you, you're playing with the Chargers, Bills, Chiefs, and Saints. But then after a couple of years, you got a call from your agent, and what did that call mean to you, and what did he say at sort of the end of these 3 years?
Well, he just said that the phones had stopped ringing and that he was calling all of his contacts and trying to keep it going. But there's you can kind of calculate it to like a 3-year kind of rotation. By that time I had gotten a little bit older in NFL standards, and there was newer, fresher guys that weren't as beat up as I was, and so it was just kind of the obvious transition from being somebody that could come in and play a little bit to not getting the call anymore. And it was a tough situation, but it was almost like, it was almost just like that bell ringing, man. It was just, it wasn't just saying that, well, you might want to start thinking about something else. For me, it was, well, your life is done now. There's nothing that's going to be better than what you were doing, right? Like, that gave you everything you wanted. That was everything that you had dreamed for and thought that was your purpose and your identity. So it was a lot deeper than just kind of, oh, I'm done with football. It was more of nothing's going to be this good anymore.
Wow.
And I wholeheartedly believe that, man. Like I just remember just kind of sitting back and staring out the window and just saying, well, like, what's the point anymore? What's the point now?
Mm.
and that point, man, when you have no direction, you have no path, you have no like guide, nobody telling you where to be at this time on Monday morning. You don't have anywhere to be.
Wow. Hutch Eckerson, our guest right now on Unpacking It, former NFL offensive lineman. And in this part of the story, we're talking about his career ending, the dream is over, coming to this realization. And so at this point in your life, did you have any level of faith or what did you decide to turn to at this point in the story?
Well, I wish I could say this is when I picked myself up and opened my Bible and started to see what God had planned for me, but it was really the opposite. I went internal. I went deep into myself. That was not a good place to be. I didn't want to be around too many people. I was hurting. There was a real pain. It was like an emotional pain that almost turned into like a physical pain. I was looking for an escape. I had this trauma in my life that instead of facing and going through the work of getting better, I went the other way and tried to numb it and tried to run away from it. And unfortunately, painkillers seemed like a good alternative to feeling this pain I was feeling. So, just using those pain pills to ease, just have like a little bit of comfort, just like I don't want to sit in this any longer than I have to. Once you start using those things, man, you're using them for kind of fun and recreationally, quickly escalates to using them as the way of life, really. And it unfortunately it became sort of the main goal in my life, just to not feel anything, to be honest with you, man.
Man, so then how bad did it get? What did the addiction look like in your life?
Well, I hid it very well. It was, you see, my greatest fear in life, I believe, is pain. I don't like to hurt. And I don't think there's too many people that do. I think a lot of people would identify with the fear of pain. And to me, the pain of realizing and facing this idea of my dream not happening, like everything that I had worked for, everything that I had done, as long as I could remember, was leading up to this kind of mountaintop, and it had happened, and it was happening, and then it just didn't. It was like, you are playing NFL football and living the dream that you have wanted your whole life, and then a week later, you're standing in line, a 320-pound offensive lineman at the grocery store in your hometown, and you don't know who you are, and you don't know what you have, and that emptiness, man, that place, that's a place that I don't plan to ever go back to that place, man. That's not a good place.
Amen. Amen. Hutch Eckerson, our guest right now on Unpacking It, former NFL offensive lineman, sharing his story of now. Let's get to the point of overcoming addiction. And so he's described this place of darkness and emptiness and addiction. And so take us into the turning point, the day that your life began to change, and ultimately the addiction coming into the light, and your family recognizing what you had been going through. What was that moment for you?
March 30th, 2016. Life had been moving forward. Time is, there's no flex in time, man. It's going. Even though you aren't, even though, I was, on the shelf and kind of had hit pause for a few years. I was on my motorcycle, and next thing I knew, I woke up and I was in the hospital. Oh. And I have no idea what happened. I see my mom and my wife standing over me, and I don't know what happened. The crazy thing about it was that the little security camera at a gas station actually caught what happened on tape. So I was actually able to see exactly what happened. And I was on my bike, and a lady decided to do a U-turn and just nailed me, threw me off the bike. I went down the street on the incoming traffic and went up on a curb. And, it was the first time that I guess I had a moment of clarity and realized that I had been pushing away. I had been tripped up, skinned my knee, tapped on the shoulder by what I now know was God's voice and his plan for me. But I was ignoring it instead of listening to whatever this power, whatever this nudge coming from the other direction was. And that was the first time that I sort of felt the weight of that and felt like I had a second chance. I felt like I had an opportunity to see another side to this whole thing. I knew that I was not going to be able to do this alone. And that's when I really just decided to open up to my family and my wife. And, she had no idea. She really had been married to me for like a year. And, we were buying a new home and talking about starting a family. And I had this raging addiction, and she had no idea that it was even happening. I mean, that's how well I was able to conceal, what was truly going on. And, man, this was just like a time when I needed to get help. And that's when I decided to check myself into rehab and go out there and just really just kind of see what this force, this like power that I was feeling on, trying to get my attention. Man, that's really where I was stripped of everything. You don't have a phone, you don't have access to family. You're even with everybody there. You're not better or worse than anybody there. And that's really when God started to show me a little bit about, the plans he had for me. I started just to open my mouth and say, trying to put these emotions and these deep kind of like feelings that I had inside into words, and really started to minister to the guys around me. And that was the first time that I sort of had the idea of something like Made New. And it just, it took me a little while to get it all going, man. But wow, like that's just how awesome God is. It's just how he will, bring you from the mountaintop to being broken, and then he'll build you back up and actually start to give you everything that you wanted. It just won't look like you wanted, but it will be just as sweet. You know what I mean? And you don't have to carry that load on your own anymore. That's the best part, man.
That's right. Well, Hutch, we need to take a quick break, but we want to continue with your story. It's just an incredible story. So We'll come back. We'll continue with Hutch Eckerson, former NFL offensive lineman, joining us right here on Unpacking It.
Going beyond the field, this is Unpacking It with Bryce Johnson on Sports Byline USA.
Hey, it's Bryce Johnson, and it is time to start thinking about the upcoming fantasy football season. And good news, Unpacking It Ministries has a resource for you that will take you from the draft all the way through the championship. Order your Fantasy Football Fellowship Playbook today, and each week, read about a fantasy concept and how it relates to the Bible and our own lives. It's designed for your league to discuss at weekly league meetings, on the phone, or in person. The FFF Playbook will add more meaning and purpose to the fantasy season and add value to your league. Grow in your faith, build deeper relationships with other owners in the league, and make more of your fantasy season. Join us at fantasyfootballfellowship.org and find all the details and order the FFF Playbook today. That's fantasyfootballfellowship.org.
Bringing you unique insight into the faith and character of guests from the sports world. Welcome back to Unpacking It with Bryce Johnson.
Welcome back to Unpacking It. I'm Bryce Johnson. Hope you're doing great today. Hutch Eckerson sharing his story with us, former NFL offensive lineman who's been able to overcome addiction. He now is a follower of Jesus, and he started a ministry called Made New Ministries, and just wants to continue to just share the story of God's goodness and what God has done in his life, and share the stories of others as well. And Hutch, I want to ask you more about that in a moment, but a little bit to get more and I guess unpack your story a little bit more as far as being able to experience the freedom and the peace and the grace that you are now living in every day. Take us into what that transformation process has been like, and what God has revealed to you, and how you've been able to get to the point of, football no longer being your whole identity, your dream, and how he's been able to, give you that new dream that you've alluded to.
It really came down to what was I willing to, be obedient to. If you listen to Made New's second podcast, we had a great conversation about obedience, and I think that without really knowing what I was doing, I started being obedient to the small things, to the things that I had the strength to. And now I had all this other big stuff. I had all this other, chaos of, getting back to a high place. But, that was such a far off, untouchable thing when you're sitting at a rehab facility and everything has been stripped from you. And I started to be obedient in the small things, because it's easy to be obedient in things that line up with what you want. If I said, well, God told me to go play football, and make a lot of money, yeah, I'll be obedient to that. But what about when he says, go take, this kid that I keep putting on your mind, go take him out to lunch and just be like a friend to him, or why don't you go help this person or tell this person something good that you see in them, even though it might be uncomfortable. And I guess my journey has been, my answer to that question is lean into being uncomfortable, man, because the pain of being uncomfortable, when that starts to outweigh the pain of where you're at right now or what you're dealing with right now, when you make that decision, it only lasts the sting only lasts for a second, and then you see a whole nother side to whatever you're doing, and that's God's will for our life, man, to just really trust him. Let him do the heavy lifting. If we will be obedient in the small things, he will take care of the big things. A good analogy to that, a guy today in Bible study was telling me a story about how he visited a nuclear sub when he went to the Pro Bowl in Hawaii. And, they went on, I think it was like the USS Ohio or something like that. But there was one guy on the ship who has been trained to mash the button, to send the nuke out of it or whatever, send the bomb. And, he doesn't think about what's going to happen after he hits that button. He was told he gets called and interprets the right time to hit that button and doesn't think about what's going to happen after that. Like, that's above his pay grade. And that's kind of like what I think God does in our lives. Is like, when you get that call, don't say, well, what if, well, this isn't the right time, or no, just if God tells you to hit the button, just hit the button and see what kind of things happen, man. And that's sort of the challenge that I would tell listeners today is just, do those little things, hit that button and watch what happens. It's pretty amazing.
Wow. No, it's so strong, and what a tremendous illustration, and to really get to that place of surrender and obedience. It's a powerful place to live out of, and Hutch Eckerson is our guest right now, sharing all about it here on Unpacking It. He's a former NFL offensive lineman, and he's started a new ministry called Made New Ministries, and the website is BeMadeNew.com. BeMadeNew.com. And so share a little bit more about your vision for this, and really, what God's placed on your heart to be able to impact people.
Well, this was definitely something that I felt God calling me to do. It was a very simple command. He told me things are different now, and to dream bigger. Those were the two things that I heard directly. And it was I guess I interpreted that to kind of start this platform, just because of everything that had happened and sort of how I'd seen he used me in the past in a very natural way to minister to people. And realizing that all he wants us to do is be witnesses for him. All he wants us to do is talk about things that he has done in our lives. And I said, well, shoot, I'm going to do that and give somebody else the opportunity to say all the awesome things that he's done in their lives and share their story and really try to pull out the good stuff of what God's doing in people's lives just all around the world. And that's really where the idea of Made New came from. I'm not really trying to be a preacher or anything or talk to anybody from the mountaintop. I just want to say how awesome God is and how much he has transformed my life. And Made New was built on relationships. And first of all, a relationship with him, but a relationship with others. It's like, it's so awesome to think that we can have a personal relationship and don't worry about the legalistic stuff. Don't worry about, earning your way to get God's blessing, because that's just not correct. I believe that God just wants to love you and he wants to be your friend. And if you kind of like think about someone you're trying to get close with today, how would you go about that? How would you really get to know somebody? And you can do that looking in the Bible and really spending time with the Holy Spirit. It's a real thing that I have felt. And once you feel it, it's kind of hard to not think about and dig into. And man, the progression of that journey and where it puts you and where it takes you, that's something that I want everybody to know that that it's available for them. It's freely given. It's not something you have to do. It doesn't matter what you've done. It's something that you have and you can access, and it's real and it's the truth, and it will take you to a new reality, and it will give you the life that you've always thought you needed, and it will be better. It will be better. It will be better than what you wanted. It's kind of the message of that, man. And Made New, I want to be built on relationships. I want it to be built on community. I want the things that you and I are talking about right now to just be accessible to anybody that wants them, and know that like God is going to give you things based on your ability right now. And if you will do the small things that he's telling you to do with what he's given you, man, just watch how much that multiplies and builds in your life. It's a real thing that anybody can practice. And man, I just want to encourage people listening to this to listen to that little nudge, listen to that little voice inside of your head, because it might be God. It might be God. And don't wait until you get run over and knocked down the street and have to go to rehab and have to, fight for your life to realize that. Don't wait until you lose everything to realize that that's available today, right now. So that's kind of a blanket look at everything, man.
Oh, amen. Well, let's end it right there. It's a powerful message and testimony from Hutch Eckerson. He made it to the NFL. It was cut short, got into drugs and painkillers and had an addiction, but God woke him up, and Hutch responded, and I know him personally, and he's a good friend, and to be able to see the joy in his life, the peace in his life, the transformation that has taken place is encouraging. And so, Hutch, so thankful that you were willing to share that with our listeners today, and I know people are inspired right now by your story and ultimately what God has done in you. So greatly appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Bryce, thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
Man, what a cool story, and so thankful that Hutch was willing to share that with us today, and really hope that you as a listener were encouraged and inspired by that. And I know for me, just to hear how God has radically changed his life just encourages me to know that, you know what, God is working in the lives of people. He's taken broken people at the end of themselves, people caught in addiction, and is changing their hearts. And it takes, us getting to that place of surrender and letting go and saying, all right, Lord, you take over, because my way isn't working. And so I can relate to elements of that story from Hutch, and I'm sure that you can as well. And ultimately, we all have the same need for a Savior. And so thankful for Jesus, and thankful for what he's done in Hutch's life. And I'm excited to see what ends up happening moving forward for Hutch as far as his ability to impact others through his ministry. And so definitely encourage you to check out Made New Ministries, and his website is bemadenew.com, and he's already got a couple podcasts up there, a couple episodes, and so you can definitely listen to those and give Hutch your support, and let him know that you heard him on the show today, and just encourage him to keep sharing his story, because I think it can continue to inspire a lot of people. So thanks to Hutch. Coming up next, we're going to do our segment Unpack This about the NBA Finals. And I know for me, man, this was an awesome finals. All 6 games were really fantastic. And up until the very end, I mean, the Warriors had a chance. Steph Curry had a shot to win it. And so a lot of storylines coming out of this year's finals. And I had hoped that there would be a Game 7. But we still have a lot to discuss in regards to that game. And my big takeaway, asking the question, why do bad things happen to great teams? And then how that relates to our own lives, and the question that we often ask, why do bad things happen to good people? So, is there a correlation between the two? Stick around, and we'll unpack that a little bit. Be sure to check out our website, unpackingit.com. Subscribe to our email devotional and our podcast. And so thankful that you're joining us today as we unpack sports, faith, and life. I'm Bryce Johnson. My email, bryce@unpackingit.com. We'll be back right after this.
Inspiring conversations and intriguing interviews. More Unpacking It with Bryce Johnson after this.
This is Unpacking It. It's time for our final segment of the day. We call it Unpack This, where I take a current sports story and relate it to the Bible and our own lives. So let's jump right in. The Toronto Raptors are the NBA champions, and they have earned so much respect and are worthy champions. But I can't help but take into consideration all that has happened to the Warriors. They were hit with injuries to Durant, Thompson, and Looney, and Cousins still isn't at 100%. This was a great team with multiple future Hall of Famers who had won back-to-back NBA Finals. Yet even they couldn't avoid the torn Achilles or the torn ACL. What's interesting is that after years of receiving the good breaks, building a dynasty, and doing all the right things to contend for a championship each season, bad things seem to happen to them all at once. Even though we shouldn't feel sorry for the Warriors after all of their success, we can wonder why bad things sometimes happen to great teams, which then leads to the more agonizing question of why do bad things happen to good people? Oftentimes we think we're doing the right things in life, we're making good decisions and pursuing Jesus instead of a sinful life. Then, all of a sudden, everything around us starts to collapse. Health concerns, job issues, family dynamics, and overall loss. We begin to ask, why are these bad things happening to me? But instead of asking that, we should be mindful of how we're going to respond. And we must remember how God has taken care of us in the past. Similar to the Warriors, we can choose to be thankful for the wins we've already experienced and rest in knowing that so much is out of our control. In the Bible, the book of Job is all about his suffering and losing it all while remaining in humble submission to God. Even though Job was a great and righteous man, bad things still happen to him. Job provides this perspective that can encourage us today. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will leave this life. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Throughout all this, Job did not sin or blame God for anything. So I hope you're willing to unpack that for yourselves and really appreciate you joining me today. I'm Bryce Johnson. I'm a sports fan who follows Jesus. I believe in the good news that he died on the cross for my sins, he was resurrected, and through faith, I have been saved by his grace. I hope that is true for you as well, and I hope you'll join me as we live life as sports fans who follow Jesus together. Have a wonderful week. This has been Unpacking It with Bryce Johnson.